All right, there's the sermon. We got to go away the sermon. Is it not extraordinary? I can carry around my entire brain, right? It's just. I mean, it really is extraordinary. I'm so great. I also want you all to know, you can kind of look up here that there's the sermons for this year, all right? So, I got a folder, right? There's sermons for this year. Highland got its own subfolder. You all got so much of my, I was like, oh, it's own. That's right. Yeah. Let's pray together. God, thank you for worship. God, for extraordinary music and our hearts being lifted into your presence. For prayers and leadership. For Will and Bob and Ann and Allison. For the choir. For Paul. For Jonathan. But especially, Lord, for you coming into our midst. We thank you for that. And now, God, help us to turn our hearts and particularly now our minds to think together that we really truly might be shaped to be faithful to Jesus. For we pray in his name. Amen. Some people have said that I look kind of young, and to them I'd say this, which is, this is what I have to do to read these days. So, if you have ever, I'm kind of similar. Like this is a room full of church people who think about the church, right? So this is, that's my assumption as we come into this room. So if you've ever, and I would guess many of you have been elders or deacons or trustees or pastors. I see some pastors in this room, or you've worked at a church. We got two places over here. Pretty soon it'll be standing room only. But I'm still like this is a room of people who care. You already care. I'm not making a case today why we would care about the church. You all are here. You care. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care. So part of what that means is if you've ever woken up early in the morning and you kind of wondered, you just kind of start wondering. It's different kind of wondering than I was talking about in there. It's less the existential wondering about what can I do this stuff, but more you're kind of just thinking. You're thinking about the world and the church. What's going on? Where are we headed? What do we do? I had a wonderful time with your elders yesterday and your pastors, and you have such good leadership. Just such good leadership here. I'm so impressed with them and felt so honored to be with them. And one of them at the end said, we want to grow. First, we've got to rebuild from COVID, like everybody does, right? So, what a good thing to separate those two, to say one is necessary for the other, but they're not the same thing. And so there's this rebuilding that we're all doing as we come out of COVID and as we figure out, it's not going back, right? It's kind of figuring out. But then there's also this kind of moving forward. What do we do? But you'll notice that the title says, we are here now. How do we go? It doesn't say where do we go, and it doesn't say what do we do. I think those are questions that we often ask. I want to spend a little bit of time with you thinking about where we are, right? Just a little bit of time doing that. But then my question, I intend to be, like always, a particular question, which is, how do we go? I think we've got to answer the how do we go question before we even know where do we go or what do we do to get there. So before you even start to think about where are we headed, what are we going to do to get there, how do we go? We are here now. How do we go? So I'll talk a little bit about here how just a couple of points where we are, and then a little bit about what that means. But first, let me just mention a couple things. One is, I really am honored to be here. I was a youth intern here in the 1990s. At one point, coming up I-81, we were on a mission trip, we're coming up I-81. Are we live streaming this? Is it getting recorded? Yeah, right. I'm just thinking, well, I'll tell you the story, and then you'll be like, okay. So we're coming up I-81, and we got a couple of vans, youth vans, and it was pretty slow. So the traffic's pretty slow. 2 lanes coming up I-81, right? So I'll admit, I'm driving one of the vans. The other van pulls up beside us. They lower all their windows and kind of do their stuff. And do you know what super soakers are? Yeah, right. Like supersized squirt guns, right? I mean, squirt gun doesn't begin to get at what's going on with the super soaker. And they just start like super soaking us. And we had our windows down, and like everyone got wet. Yeah, I'll just tell you the truth, all right? So then it was still slow, but they got in front of us. So I got on the shoulder of I-81. I'm your youth intern. Pull up beside them, we open the door, all the super soakers come out, and we soak them. So folks, that is both dangerous and illegal, right? Like that's why I was like, oh, I guess I'll just, I think the statutes of limitations have passed on that. In some ways it illustrates my point. You can know where you're going, but if done poorly, if the process is wrong, if it's done poorly, it's not good. It does give me a chance to say to you, if you had told that young man, whom Dale Marks was the youth director, by the way, we talked, I just want you to know, like, as leaders, your people were like, that's not okay to do, right? Like, they were clear with me. They're like, yay. Will, don't do, you already know that, Will, but he's like, of course, like, he's like, oh, scratch him off the list of potential youth leaders. Don't ask him to come on a youth list. Right? Like, if you had told that young man that he would be invited to give this distinguished lecture, he would not have believed you. You know, I would not have. And honestly, if you had asked the adults present, they probably would have said the same thing, is what I'm thinking. So it's just, yeah, it's great to be here. The other thing is I'm a process person. One of the ways I got this gig is that Anne heard I was finishing up a dissertation and thought, well, if someone's writing a dissertation with a lot of thoughts, maybe they've got some that would be helpful. Particularly because Anne heard I was writing about the renewal of the church. And she thought, well, that would be good, that would be helpful for us. And that is true, but my dissertation is focused on the decision-making process of the church, and particularly on the history of decision-making in Presbyterianism and Robert's rules. I have discovered that Robert's rules, it's like a spell. So when you say the words Robert's rules, here's what people do. They go, oh, that's really interesting. They just go to sleep. That's what happens. And like in a group this size, I would bet there's 2 people who like lean in. You know what I mean? Like that's like, so I let me undo the spell. I am not talking about Robert's rules today. What I'm trying to do is take some thoughts that are kind of underneath that, I would say, and teasing them out in some other directions, I think. And I'm honestly really grateful for the chance to do that. I want to start I think it's helpful to know people. Well, you might know me. It's not moving forward, Jonathan. I'll turn it off. How do we go? That's right. Am I too far away? He'll give me an extension. Well, I'll start. So Allison, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Sometimes it's just, kind of helpful to know people a little bit. I'll just keep pushing it every once in a while. You just tell me if my family pops up. Hey, right. All right. So you know what? I've got 3 kids that Allison graciously mentioned. One of them's in graduate school. one of them's in college, and one of them's in high school. How about that? Like I'm kind of still staggered. My oldest daughter is doing a PhD in clinical psychology out in California. She just moved there. Like she did orientation last week. She takes her first classes tomorrow. My son is a senior at Calvin College with a girlfriend in Denver. He's trying to finish up his coursework this semester so he can move to Denver. What's important is that there's a girlfriend in Denver, right? You're getting that, yeah. And then our youngest is a senior at Lancaster Mennonite High School, which we're really grateful for. It's been a wonderful experience, and she's looking at colleges. My wife is actually the provost at Lancaster Bible College. Am I pointing in the right direction? I don't know, like somewhere there, like that direction, right? So, she has been. She's excellent at that job. It's a very intense job, as you might guess. And then we have a dog, Brahm. Brahm came into our family when my son put one thing on his Christmas list. He wanted an Apple Watch. This is back when Apple Watches were even more expensive than they are now. We're like, you're not getting an Apple Watch. And so he put Chocolate Lab on his list, and then he took Apple Watch off. We were talking about the Apple Watch, and it disappeared. so we got a Chocolate Lab. Do you all know which is more expensive, an Apple Watch and a Chocolate Lab? I should have done this before I got there. I didn't know. Like, oh, this would be great. Now it's my dog. I mean, my son's in college, right? So, my dog. I was, for 15 years, pastor at the Chestnut Level Presbyterian Church. Loved being a pastor. I just loved being a pastor. This is where I started asking the question, not just where do we go and what do we do, but how do we go? Because it occurred to us early on there, myself and the leaders I was working with, that the world was changing, and it was changing rapidly, and it was changing tumultuously, and it was changing even ways that were hard for us to understand, and even when we felt like we caught up to it, it just kind of changed again. And so in the midst of that, we came to the conclusion that the church house, which is the lower right-hand side, which is the white building that's there, which was built in the 1850s as a dormitory for a school that was there. So it was built as a dormitory, turned into a Sunday school building. It had when I arrived there, it had the church office on the second floor, although the phone line came in to a room behind the sanctuary, and neither one of them did I have an office in. I mean, it was just, it's like that kind of history. So we came to the conclusion that the building that was built in the 1850s needed to come down. How's that for, but you all have done that here, right? You had stuff, you know that. Like you decide, we're gonna tear down a building and we're gonna build that, you can see that existing sanctuary, we're gonna build that Family Life Center, which up at the top there where it says play area is actually kind of where that church house was. So folks, I got news for you. You all know this. You don't stand up and be like, hey, let's tear down a building. And everyone goes, that's great. Right? No. You also know this too. You don't go to a congregation and say we're going to do it. And here, you know what? Robert's rules. Sorry. Robert's rules would say you go to the congregation, you take a vote, and if over 50% of the congregation wants to do it, you do it. It's a spectacularly bad idea to tear down a building and build another building if 45% of the congregation's opposed to it. Right? Like what crazy person would do that? So we started to think, well, not just what do we do, but how do we do this? And how do we do it in ways that empower and uplift? Who wants to end up with a building at the end of the day, people are like, this is a horrible idea. That would be horrible. So we started to think about that kind of stuff. I started teaching at Lancaster Theological Seminary, and Eric's here. Eric has done a great work there at Lancaster, and it's continuing to change, right, in this rapidly changing world. And I started to realize there that there were a couple of places of, in my mind, analysis that I thought students were consistently kind of just missing, and I started to get intrigued by that. I'll roll out a couple of those for you today. I'm so grateful to them. They helped me kind of think through a bunch of this stuff. And then I became stated clerk of the Presbytery of Donegal, which happened in 2016, and it was as I started to embark on this journey of doing this PhD, and got a much broader view of the church. Every view is limited, but I started to work with more churches, started to travel some nationally, got involved, and started to kind of tease out some of this, at least, kind of on that kind of a level, what's going on, and particularly started to think, how are we as we do this kind of stuff. And then I went to the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, where I will defend my PhD and be finished on November 10th. Now, I want you to look. Oh, that didn't change. Oh, there we go. So I went over there and I took this picture. Now, here's the deal. That's not the room in which I will defend my PhD. But the key thing here is I thought it was. All right, so that's the key for that picture. because I put that on my, it's a screensaver. And I would look at it and I would be like, I'm going to get there. And I am going to get there. It's just not going to be that room. So the goal, that's the goal. It is. It's good to have a goal, right? By God's grace, I will become myself. All right, and all of that underneath this question is thinking about what's different about the world and what that means for the church. And so here's what I want you to do. I know that the handout it's full of words because I am a Presbyterian and but there's some white spaces on it somewhere. You can find some white space. I would like you to think. This is going to be a little homework. We're going to do 2 or 3 minutes of homework. You're just going to jot down some stuff. I want you to write down what is different about the world around you. Now, before you start doing it, let me give some other instructions. I want this to be local and concrete, and I want you to try to keep away from evaluative statements, right? Like this is not evaluation. This is like just literally, and you can go back as far as you want in your own life, but keep it focused on your own life. I don't want to know what's different about Amsterdam unless you've been to Amsterdam, right? But this is the kind of stuff where you think about, if you've been living in the same house for 10 years, if you walked out the door, what would you see that was different? If you worked in an industry for 40 years, what was different from the beginning, from the end? And don't tell me it was worse and don't tell me it was better. Just, does the question make sense? All right, so this is like 2 or 3 minutes, right? Take 2, and just this isn't right or wrong. You're just kind of writing down some notes. Write down, if you come up with one thing, that's great. If it starts to pour out of your mind, just start to write it down. All right, I've started a timer now. Don't find stuff. And you get 1 more minute. So just, right, so again, we don't want to, this is experimental and stuff, so it doesn't need to be too long. And Jonathan, on the fly, would we have a microphone that we could kind of run around the room? Not everybody's going to share, obviously, but we'll have 4 or 5 people who want to just share some things. "20 seconds. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say. And nervous, because whenever you turn the microphone over in a room, you just wonder what's going to happen. All right, let's do it. Allison, would you be our Sherpa or whatever? Yeah, thank you so much. So let's just, does somebody want to share? And again, you get really like about 15 seconds, just give us your list. Oh, there we go, Betty. I want a few of them. I just want a few of them. Yeah.
I think
Oh, no, wait, Betty, and then we'll come to you, Larry.
So thinking of if I would walk out.
You know what? Tell us your name too. Because some of this will be an opportunity for us to be like, oh, we don't know people, right? So yeah.
Betty Price.
And why don't you stand up, Betty? I'll keep making up more rules. Thank you.
Just got new contact lenses, so
Oh.
I look very different. People don't even recognize me, so no glasses for the first time. Anyway, I think that to me, the key change, if you'd walk out, say in the last 10 years, technology has certainly impacted the way that we all understand our world and view it and interact with everybody else.
Massive changes in technology.
So I'll just say that one.
Yes, they say that the first capsule to go to the moon had about the same computing power as this phone. I mean, it's just extraordinary. It's just extraordinary to think that. Okay, Larry. Here, Allison. Larry. Right here, and then.
I think.
Right. And Larry, you got to introduce. If you can, stand up and introduce yourself.
I'll try to stand up.
Yep.
I'm Larry Fowler. In my career, I saw business goals change dramatically. We went from a period of time when we were focused on making the best product to where our whole focus was on increasing stockholder value.
There you go. All right. So different values, right? So there's some different values, different goals there. Thanks, Larry. I think Juanita said she'd go next.
Mine are more personal. For 30 years, we had a field, an Amish farm, and 2 years ago, a house was built there.
Yeah.
So we now have a neighbor in our backyard instead of the Amish plowing the field.
Juanita, can I just pause you there? I think that's a key change for Lancaster County over the past generation. Right, the amount of farmland that is no longer farmland just in our midst, just locally in our midst. And again, without evaluation, I'm not saying that's good or bad, it just is. There's less farmland. And, right, so, okay, go on, Juanita, thank you.
Larry's retired, and so he's home.
Huh.
And we have more time together.
Yeah.
My body cannot do what it did 30 years ago, the yard work, or even just in the Sunday school kneeling down with children. And the fourth one is my grandchildren are in Canada.
Wow.
So
and let me say, thank you, Juanita, for those that was, I mean, these are all really wonderful kind of, and different observations from different perspectives. Let me just say about grandkids in Canada, it is absolutely the fact that more people have family that's farther away than they used to have, right? So at Chestnut level, we encounter this all the time. I would say, oh, where's your kids? Oh, they moved to Pittsburgh to go to college. Where are they now? They're in Pittsburgh. They're in Cincinnati, right? I mean, that's a major change for churches, which often in generations past repopulated themselves from internally. And again, good, bad, we can, but it is. All right. Yep, we'll go back here, Jeff, and then we'll come up here.
Where are we going? To Jeff?
Back to go to Jeff, yep. And introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jeff Doan, and this will be Sally in my list.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Thanks, Sally.
definitely more working from home.
Yeah.
Technology as well, but
But a concrete application, right? I mean, there's a specific way that's shifted many of our worlds.
and also worshiping from home, maybe.
Yeah.
Highland didn't really have that to the quality that it does today before the pandemic. So
Folks, we have no idea. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I have no idea. Allison's nodding. I mean, we have no idea what that means for what it means to be church yet. I don't think it's just, but I think we all go, it's massive. So, okay, Jeff, thank you.
So I did listen to your sermon today, and I'll just say in general, it seems like the old methods of approaching something just don't seem to work. They don't seem to fit, and I don't know what does. That's the uncertainty, and there's conflict in that. What do you do then?
What do you do?
How
Right.
do you approach things?
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. And we'll come up here to folks here. Allison.
Gail?
Oh, nice.
Our neighborhood.
Oh, but tell us your names, please.
Oh, Tom and Gail Whitworth.
Great.
We moved, and we have a new neighborhood, and very different friends. The old friends that are still close, and the new friends that we have now. I physically have vertigo, and I am not able to maneuver myself as well, and I'm not supposed to drive.
Ah, right. So there's, yeah, that's, I wonder.
is huge.
That's huge. So I really appreciate, a couple of you have said, like inwardly dealing with transitions in terms of our health and who we are over the course of years is massive in terms of our lives. And of course, impacted by the fact that, I mean, quite frankly, we didn't used to live as long as we did, right? I mean, so yeah, so good, thank you.
Not being able to drive is huge.
Not being able to drive is huge, just huge. Thank you.
She didn't want to say that she aged a little bit too, so.
Here's my little proof of that right here. So I'm with you.
Oh, man, pick on Tom. The biggest thing to me was what I used to do, I needed to do. Now I do what I want to do.
What a key shift for many of us in
That's
our
retirement.
lives. Thank you. Let's do one more in the back here, and then I think, oh, you know, we'll do two more, because we'll go to the back here and then come up front,
Go in the back.
or kind of the middle.
Hi, good morning. I'm Sarah Woodbury, a visitor to Highland, regular visitor. I'll tell you what's new in my life and new that I've noticed around me. So I now have a dream spouse, dream house, and a church I can attend close to both. So that really makes me happy.
Yeah.
What's different around me is more focus on process, robust, sustainable process that lead to good outcomes. And if you can't tell, I work in Lean Six Sigma, work in healthcare.
Yeah, great.
But I see it in schools too,
Right.
and I think and it's part of your message
And I
today.
think,
So
I mean, in
was
some sense, you just summed up part of what I'm trying to say. Right. Process matters.
pretty much.
Yes.
I was very
All
excited.
right, thank you.
Process cheerleaders here.
Yeah.
So more women leading, more awareness of gender role expectations and their impact. School boards talking about and wrestling with LGBTQ issues, that's new. Remote work, cell phones being all-encompassing in lots of ways, more polarization. You touched on it this morning, more distrust in institutions.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
those are some of the things I noticed and experienced.
Thank you. So let's just, if I can, awareness of gender and changes in our lives in terms of who would lead in many of our institutions. I mean, that is a big change over the course. My wife is the first woman provost of Lancaster Bible College, right? I mean, and the first woman on that cabinet ever. Yeah, and I'm of course I'm delighted by that. I mean, so you know, you've got your first woman senior pastor here, right? So I mean, and people are delighted. You know, yeah, we can clap for that. If I was moderating the meeting we were electing, I'd have to say no anyway. So. But that has shifted some things in our lives. Issues of human sexuality and an increased awareness of those things, talking about those things, shifting in terms of the way our society manages and kind of makes allowances for things, an increase in process. So thank you. So technology, yeah. And then let's come up here.
Okay. Jennifer. We'll do Jennifer first and then.
Yeah, we'll do Jennifer. And that's good. We'll do both. That's excellent.
Okay.
Introduce yourself, please. Yeah.
I'm Jennifer Funk. I've been here for a long time. My list is kind of like Juanita's. It's more personal.
Yeah, thank you.
I live alone now. I have 3 new neighbors, so besides my house being changed, with people, the neighbors around me have changed. I'm no longer a speech therapist, which really is very odd for me not to be. I have family in the county, but I don't see them.
Yeah.
And I have to make all the decisions myself now. And so that's been very strange. It's like I just went on just a small bus trip with AAA. I never had to do the planning.
Yeah.
Gary always did the planning
Yeah.
of where we would go and how we would go, and so it's all a new world.
It's all a new
And
world.
it's like-
Thank you.
It's very scary.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
My name's Bill Ebel. We've moved to Brethren Village 4 years ago, so that's changed a great deal. But I think that particularly within the society, a couple of things are going on. And technology is very much a part of it, but the leadership in Politics, I think, has shifted. We've seen more authoritarian approaches to how to solve problems, and I'm not at all sure that those are helpful. And also, the race relations have been changing. We had changes during the 18th century and 19th century particularly. There were a lot of changes with race relationships. And in the 20th century, that's been carried on by Martin Luther King and those groups, and we seem to be making some progress. We had our ups and downs in that, but at this point in time, we still have a major problem to solve. So I've read recently we're now in the third generation of race relations.
Yeah, Bill, thank you. So thanks for highlighting two things for us here. One is a shift in terms of, I talked about this morning as a way we relate to institution, political leadership, that polarization, wondering what's going on. I was talking with a leader at Chestnut Level a while ago, and I referenced back to a sermon that I preached there, which was, let's just say it was 10 years ago. And I said, oh, I remember that sermon. He's like, I remember that sermon. And I said to him, I don't think I could say that today. And he said, you know what, I don't, like it would have just received in a different way, because whatever it was I said would have been like kind of taken sides in a way that it wasn't then. And so just very interesting for those of us who are preaching and trying to speak a word from God to a community to try to navigate that. And then issues of race, changing demographics, for us and for our future, but also the way that the past sins have continued to impact us communally and what we do about that, and just maybe for some of us, just an increased awareness of that. I'll claim that and name that for myself. I, about 10 years ago, probably was much more aware of looking around rooms of leadership and talking and thinking about gender and thinking about, oh, look, we're all guys. That's not good. Thinking about that. Whereas it's even more recent for me personally to look around a room and go, oh, we're pretty much all white. I wonder what that means for us. And is it's not what I would claim, as I would want something different as a kingdom value. How do we do that? What does that mean for people? That's all great. Thank you all so much. Now here's my question for you. And listen, this is a binary question, right? Is the world getting better or is it getting worse? Now, and this is here's the deal. You're not beholden to this, right? But who thinks the world's getting better? All right, put your hands up. Who thinks the world's getting worse? Interesting, just really interesting. Thank you. Thanks for doing that. One of the things that happened to me in my life is that I started teaching at Lancaster Seminary, and so I was dealing with some more younger leaders and kind of coming up to faith-based institutions, often really distrustful of the church, such an interesting place. And you know what? All of these people, with their cell phones, they're like, oh, the world's horrible, and it's just getting worse. And I just became really stunned by that. Just stunned by kind of how negative. And I'm experiencing that now with my young adult children who, they're young adults. The whole world is ahead of them. And they just, sometimes they just, I think it's one of the reasons they just disengage. They're like, yeah, the world, we're live streaming. I won't say that word. The world's awful. So this is a slide from an organization called Gapminder. It comes out of work by a guy named Hans Rosling in a book called Factfulness. It's not in your handout, by the way. But just look up here, and you can see this is income per person, all right, from 1800 to 2019. So it's pretty up-to-date data, right? And, you can see that, right? Income per person, and they picked out these four because they figure, they kind of representative of the world. So the United States is up there in the greenish thing. It's up. Russia, do you see that big dip for Russia? That is, that's the 1700s. That's when they had the revolution there. It's like massive, and they had a famine. They had a huge famine, really impacted them, obviously. Up. Look at China. Do you see that? And there's Nigeria. Nigeria, which is no great place to live. I mean, right, like nobody's making the claim that like Nigeria is like, you know, kind of they've solved every problem. But even in places like that, and again, I've got good friends from Nigeria. That sounds awful to say that too, right? So Nigeria's a fine place. I probably oversay that. But you can see, up. Now watch this slide. This is child mortality 0 to 5. And folks, this is a secular organization, right? This is, I would say these are facts. Child mortality from 1800 to today. Statistically, and again, people, I'm always very sensitive to say this because people who lose children young, it's a devastating tragedy, which is part of what makes this such good news. It still happens, and it's devastating when it happens. But it happens way less than it used to be. I look at those slides, and there's no way I want to go back to 1850. There's no way. I don't want to go back to 1850. In the midst of that, and this is from the book that is related to this Gapminder, they say there's five big issues the world faces. And by the way, this was written in 2017, all right? So here are the 5 issues. Global pandemic. How about that? So right, this was before COVID. They said, you want to know what's made, like what could disrupt the world? A global pandemic. Well, check, right? Financial collapse, which, I see some of you nodding and some of you are in those kind of industries, you know, and we've got little glimmers of that, right, of financial collapse, but they, in this book, are talking about even more massive scale than we have, we've experienced. World War III, right, the massive use of nuclear weapons across, it would just be catastrophic for us. Extreme poverty. Extreme poverty still continues to be a massive problem for us, globally. And climate change. Like those are the 5, they say. In the midst of this, they're trying to make the case, like, hey, the world's not just kind of tanking and everything's worse. The world in a lot of ways is way better than it used to be, but there's still these 5 things that that are still, they're still out there for us. And I want to acknowledge that, which in some ways, I appreciate you going on with that little exercise. If we were in a smaller class, if we were in a smaller setting, some of you would have been like, I'm not answering the question because it's a false binary, right? You know what I mean, right? But you graciously participated in that. This is Otto Scharmer, and this is, by the way, this is in your packet, I think. He said these words. And I'm going to read them to you. We live in an era of intense conflict and massive institutional failures, a time of painful endings and of hopeful beginnings. It is a time that feels as if something profound is shifting and dying, while something else, as the playwright and Czech President Václav Havel puts it, wants to be born. I think there are good reasons for suggesting that the modern age has ended. Today, many things indicate that we are going through a transitional period when it seems that something is on the way and something else is on the way out and something else is being painfully born. It is as if something were crumbling, decaying, and exhausting itself, while something else, still indistinct, were rising from the rubble. I think that's an accurate description of where we are now. Yeah. It was written in 2001, believe it or not. 20 years ago. And he's up, this is from his first book, Theory UL, is updated anyway, but he's updated several times and continues to say that. 3 metaphors, journey, birth, building, all helpful, but they're all indistinct. Here's a little more from him, because this helps locate it for us. The crisis of our time isn't the crisis of a single leader, organization, country, or conflict. The crisis of our time reveals the dying of an old social structure and way of thinking, an old way of institutionalizing and enacting social forms. Frontline practitioners, managers, teachers, nurses, physicians, laborers, mayors, entrepreneurs, farmers, and business and government leaders share a sense of reality They feel the heat of an ever-increasing workload and the pressure to do more. Many describe this as running on a treadmill or spinning on a hamster wheel. Or our churches feel this. Now, let me note, I'll go back to this, because I want you all to see this, because I think this is just important for us too. Sharma puts that list of people together, right? And you get the feel that he's trying to be comprehensive. Like he's saying, like, this is everybody. This is everybody. You know what's not up there? He doesn't say pastors. He doesn't say church leaders. He doesn't say churches. He doesn't. I find that interesting and instructive because I would bet that if this were written in 1950, we'd be on the list. And we're not on the list. And I'm not mad about it. I mean, we're just not on the list. That's important for us to notice. I want to say, oh yeah, this is your picture. And it came through. So I asked the session to send me pictures, a couple of pictures, including pictures of places in the church that they loved. And they did a wonderful job. And I got two of Jim's, and he showed up. He said, well, I sent another picture, and I said, it didn't come through. It came through this morning. I got it this morning. And so it was my sign that I should add this to this. And say, yeah, right, this is my what's not on the list. Right, this is what's not on his list. We're not on the list. That's you all recognize it, right? Yeah, it's a great picture. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Oh, there we go. Here's what I want to say, and then I wanted to name two issues for you, and this is the first one. Complexity. Like, I think I really think kind of what, in terms of us knowing where we are, what we now look out at is this extraordinarily complex world. It's always been complex, and I don't know that who knows if it's more complex or not, but I think that we often talk about individual issues. Like, we'll talk about technology, we'll talk about race, we'll talk about gender. They're all very important issues. But what's a challenge for us is that there seem to be so many of them. So let me just, I want you to hold that, and you can agree or disagree, right? But that's the one thing that one of the two things that I wanted to mention to you about where we are now. The other is an issue that is related to the absence of us being on Sharma's list. And that is the issue of what's called secularization. Charles Taylor, whose quote is up there, wrote a book based on the Gifford lectures that he gave that became a book called The Secular Age. And in it, he was trying to look at this world and try to get what's different about our world. And this in some sense sums up his argument. He says for the first time in human history, right now, he's trying to talk about right now, that it's possible for there to be a purely self-sufficient humanism that's a widely available option. He's not saying no one ever thought it before, but it's this widely available option that no final goal beyond human flourishing, nor allegiance to anything beyond human flourishing, is a widely available goal for many, many people these days. And what he says is, if you go back to the 1500s, if you went back to the 1500s and you started interviewing people and just saying, does God exist? You'd be hard-pressed to find a person that would say no. Particularly, let's think about Europe, our intellectual forebear, but I think you'd go around the world, and maybe in various ways you'd find different answers. But almost, of course God exists. Now, it is quite possible, right? And it would be, and there's no, honestly, there's no social stigma for someone to stand up and be like, yeah, I don't believe in God. And you all are sitting here on a Sunday, is it afternoon yet? Afternoon. But I'm telling you, none of those people in Square One in Starbucks this morning were at the least bit embarrassed they weren't in church. They maybe weren't even aware they weren't in church. They weren't sad they weren't in church. They were like happy. That is a huge, huge change for us. I think that and I think we rarely talk about it. As church people, we rarely talk about that massive shift. I can tell you, I'm gonna skip, because some of this is in there, I'm gonna skip some slides on another kind of way to come at that, and just have you look at this. This is from the Pew Trust, and it's about younger Americans being less likely to be affiliated with churches. And the youngest are at 36%. I somehow have become the middle, no longer the youngest, right there in the middle, 23%. And you can just see the massive rise in the number of people who just are no longer thinking about church very much. I think this has had two huge kind of implications. One is among more traditional people, and by that, quite frankly, I probably mean most of the people in this room, regardless of how you would consider yourself politically or theologically. I don't mean that so much, but we tend to be the people who were raised to go to church. I'm one of those people. My mom's the church organist. I grew up with my mom being the church organist. Do you know how many Sundays a year you go to church if your mom's the church organist? 51, because we went to the beach one Sunday. They were teachers and she was the church organist. We never went anywhere. We went to church. And again, I'm not complaining. This isn't a therapy session. It was great. It's fine. I was raised to go to church. By golly, on Sunday morning you go to church. Which is how many of us were raised. My own kids, who were preachers' kids. You know what preachers' kids do? They go to church every Sunday. We get more than one Sunday off, so it's not 51. I watched the pandemic just completely alter that for some of my kids. They started watching online, and then they stopped watching online. And then they discovered that they were just fine having a cup of coffee with their friends on Sunday morning. I mean, they did. And they don't have that sense of duty. I think many of us find that very confusing. I can tell you, my own kids, the people at Starbucks and Square One, if we show up to them and say to them, you should be in church on Sunday morning, it is not a compelling message to them. And it's very confusing. I just think for us, I know it's confusing. Allison went to seminary after I did, so maybe she got better than this. I went to seminary in the 1990s, and you know what? I was trained to do a good worship service, how to baptize people, how to bury people, how to marry people. I was trained how to do church programs, including Sunday school and small group Bible studies. And I was trained how to answer your questions about supralapsarianism and infralapsarianism, which no one has ever asked me about. That was all good. No one trained me what to do in a world when I wake up and people just go, no thanks. No thanks. Very confusing for all of us. The other thing it does is leave us unprepared, I think, for primarily, it's not only young adults, some of these questions are in our own souls, but primarily young adults who are asking questions like, does Christian practice of faith make sense? Does it make sense? Like, why would you, if you know, why do you believe that? What difference does it make? Does it make my life better? Like, why would I do that? And that's a massive shift for us. Massive shift for us. So complexity and secularization, and many other things, right? I mean, so some of you probably, and because you're good thinkers, you've got other things spinning in your mind, absolutely, they belong on this list too. I'm not making any claim that this is comprehensive, right? It's just the two that kind of pique mine. This is why. Well, good. Not everybody can. No, I'm not asking, but I'm not looking for answers right now. What I'm trying to name is that they're asking us those things, and that many of us, I think, can't answer it, Roger. So I mean, let's be clear. I think there are answers. I'm not. Please don't hear that as soulless. But yeah, that would. I mean, in some sense, that's an important trail to go down. It's not the trail for today, because here's I think what happens for most of us is we hear this stuff and these big issues, and we go, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And that matters. This is where we are, I think, honestly, many of us are thoroughly modern, where we discover a problem and the first thing that we want to do is fix it. Like, we're going to find a program that we're going to fix. We're going to fix this. And I want to suggest to you today that's inadequate. That the question the first question, you get to the what, you get to the what, Roger, but the first question is how. And I think the how is an attitude of adventure and acts of discovery. And you know what? If you go out and find that some other places, I would absolutely give credit. I've read so much at this point that, I try not to. I tried to attribute ideas that aren't mine to other people, but then sometimes you just start saying stuff, and you're like, "There's no way I thought of that." So it's probably out there somewhere. But I think, and I just want to say a word to you about those two things. The first is an attitude of adventure. I think that there can be a sense, faced with the complexity of the world, the deep issues of our age, whether they're issues for our own congregation or you start to think about climate change, and we really just do go, I just kind of feel done, I feel overwhelmed, I feel like I just can't do anything. So the first thing that it takes, I think, is a spirit of adventure. And I put up some kind of practices of adventure up there, which include gratitude. There is no way, I don't know of a way to create a better world only through critique. In some sense, critique is pretty easy, and many of us are trained to do that. It is practices of gratitude that re-empower our souls to make a new world. I loved the way that we started worship this morning, which was a sense of gratitude to the God who had brought us here and had formed us and shaped us. And I mean, we were there. I mean, you all were there. Like, I think that happens. We want to be involved. Practices of paying attention. And let me just say then a little bit about the past. Many of us have such a fraught relationship with the past. Because there's things we're grateful for, but also there's deep woundedness that's happened to us, some of it institutionally, some of it personally. So ways for us to release the hold of the past that it has on us, institutionally and personally, absolutely critical for us. Sometimes that's forgiveness. Sometimes maybe it's the other side, it's the act of repentance. And then let me just say a word about play. Some of you are pretty good at play, maybe. Super soakers, that's right. I would say, if I put some charts up there. If you put a chart up there and you put like responsibility and play on that chart, right? And then you put like my life this way, like the responsibility line goes up. Do you know what the play line goes? It goes down. And I think that's profoundly unhealthy for all of us. It is counterintuitive in a technological age to go, we're going to play. We're going to play. It's counterintuitive for leader teams to get together and go, there's so much to do, so many decisions to make, there's so many crises, and say, we're going to play. Profoundly recreating. I think, for all of us. I wonder sometimes whether we'd be better off having a lecture or whether we'd be better off having a, like a pickleball tournament, right? I mean, so, and I do wonder, like I just wonder about that sometimes. Related to adventure are acts of discovery. Acts of discovery are different than creating a long-range plan by which you have defined your preferable future and given your steps to get there. I remember when Allison was candidating that one of the things that she said to you is, we're going to take this year kind of to get to know one another and to start thinking about the future together, which I would just say to you, I think is a profoundly wise and good thing to have said, because I don't know of congregations that are now saying things like, well, in 2018 we had a plan and now it's 2022 and where are we on that plan? A pandemic happened, by the way, to all of those plans, right? Like no matter what you did before the pandemic, it just like, you're like, oh, okay, well, congratulations. I mean, right, like good. So there's that, and then facing issues, the size and sheer complexity of what we face. I don't know of congregations these days that are saying, here's what we're going to do in 2026. Here are the steps that we're going to get there. They are focusing on stuff like this and figuring out what to do next. It's a profound act of faith and trust. I know. I mean, I would love for the presbytery to have much more control over its own future, which of course has to do with my future, right? I would love that. We don't. That involves things like dwelling in the Word, spending time in Scripture together. Your leaders did some of that yesterday. Appreciative inquiry, which is a way to bring the good parts of the past into the future. Prayer, experimentation, and notice I put play up there. And also, it all involves this, which is the profound trust that the resurrected Lord is in our midst. I have spent plenty of my life trying to help anxious organizations survive into the future. I do believe that unless the resurrected Lord appears, that it is all for naught. I also believe the resurrected Lord appears, says to people, shalom, peace, and invites us out of locked rooms. These doors aren't locked, are they? There's fire code issues these days with that, right? We can't lock the doors anymore. Which ultimately I ultimately believe this, that ultimately we trust not just in something beyond us, but someone beyond us. And that is what we have to bring us into what might be a scary future personally and institutionally, but also can be an adventurous one. And I am so grateful to have spent some time with you and kind of rolled out some of these tentative thoughts that I've had today. And you look hungry. I am hungry. And the food is ready. And I think I went beyond what I was supposed to go anyway. So you were so gracious to listen. Allison, would you come up and pray for us and give us instructions? But as you're coming up, there was somebody in the back who raised their hand, like they wanted to say something. Oh yeah, there, yes.
I just want to say I am.
And could you introduce yourself?
Okay, I am Alice Weaver.
Great.
I am international, and I feel and experience the world around me.
Yeah.
That parents are very worried where to send their children to school, because of the curriculum is anything but lacking the good word of the Bible. And so I have all these families around where I live, around me. They educate their children at home.
Yep.
Because they are so fearful to send them to public schools where they are dictated what they should teach. Yeah. And because of that, I was waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning And I was praying before that, and there I got the answer. The whole problem of this world stems because we do not put into our curriculum the education of the good Lord. His word will stand forever.
Yeah.
And I feel our future is absolutely going in the right direction with these ministers we have right now.
Yeah.
It is wonderful, and I hope that our Presbyterian churches, the Christian churches, all different kinds of churches, find a positive way of going forward into a new century and educate, go back, and what we can do here in our church is promote future children growing up into the education of our own life and the vision that God is still in charge of us, even though the world seems to be crumbling with all the wars around us. But here we are standing tall because the Lord is with us, and he is still in charge of us.
He's still in charge, yeah. Thank you,
That's
thank
it.
you. So let me just, thank you so much. So there was a missionary, his name's Leslie Newbigin. He was a Scottish missionary. He went to India. He was Presbyterian when he got, well, he was Presbyterian, and he got there, and he got involved with the different Christians there, and they decided they wanted to combine into one denomination as a witness to Jesus Christ. So they came to him and they said, we want you to be in charge of this, but there's enough of us, we think that the person in charge of us is going to be a bishop. And he says to them, I'm Presbyterian, we don't have bishops. All right, we don't have bishops. So they come back to him, they're like, no, you're the right person, but we're going to do it this way, which would be a bishop. And he said, I disagree with you theologically, but I'm so convinced that we need to unite that I'll be a bishop. So he's the only Presbyterian bishop ever in the world, all right? So Bishop Leslie Newbigin. So he's in India for 40 years. He comes back to Great Britain. In the intervening 40 years, he discovers that Great Britain has become thoroughly secularized, all right? And they're kind of ahead of us in some of that. So he's looking around. He writes a book, and this is in the 1980s. He writes a book called The Gospel in a Pluralist Society. He does some of this kind of, not the same stuff, but this similar kind of let's think about where we are. And then at the end of it, he says, you know what? This is his phrase. He says, what's the hermeneutic of the gospel? How do people around us interpret the gospel into our lives? And he says it's this. He says it's the local congregation. That's what he says. He says the congregation, as it becomes a place of joy, a place of peace, and a place of hope, it shows something about the gospel of Jesus Christ to the people around us that they can see no other place. I mean, I think it's profoundly important how we are together, right? Notice he doesn't say, the hermeneutic of the gospel is this particular program, right? Or it's adding a worship service, or it's a worship style. He doesn't say any of that stuff. Hope, peace, joy. I mean, for people to come into, for people to encounter you in your homes and the church is not a building at all, right? But we acknowledge people come here, for them to come here and go, oh my gosh. I was in charge of my son's swim club for a while. Not a peaceful or hopeful or joyful experience at all. Profoundly anxious people, myself included. But you come here, if and when people come here and discover that, I think the world's changed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for being here. Thank you. He did such a wonderful job with our session yesterday, and then wonderful sermon this morning. Very, very powerfully delivered. Thank you. And I noticed that you had absolutely no notes.
Yes, that is true.
Nothing on the podium, nothing on the pulpit. And so it was just clearly amazing. And then this was so, so wonderful. So thank you so much. Thanks. Let us pray. Gracious God, I am so thankful for the people in this room. I am thankful to come alongside of them. I am thankful that we are thinking deeply about your church and how we can continue to build your church and proclaim the gospel of Christ. I'm also deeply thankful, Lord, for Michael, for his gifts for ministry, for the way he equips churches in the presbytery, supports them, and helps them proclaim the gospel of Christ. I pray, Lord, for his family. I pray that you bless them. I pray for this church that you would bless us, that you would give us clear direction. Help us to be before we do. Help us, Lord, to always remember your saving grace and to show each other the love and the peace and the joy of Christ. We thank you for this food that we're about to eat, for the fellowship that we're about to have. We pray, Lord, that you bless the hands that prepared it. May this food give us energy to do your will and to keep proclaiming your love and grace in both word and deed, now and forevermore. Amen. All right, well, I think we're just going to have this side go up first, and we'll just kind of move over this way.